Welcome to Tangled Twists. I'm Melissa, and this is my Sewing Made Simple series, where today we're going to talk about basic hand stitches. Hand sewing is a great way to get into sewing because it's extremely low cost. You need a needle, maybe a thimble, some thread, and a little bit of fabric. It's a great way to give a new hobby a go. It is slower than sewing on a sewing machine. It does require a little bit more practice, but it is a great tool to get started. And even if you prefer sewing with a sewing machine, you're probably still going to need a couple of hand stitches. There are many patterns that require some degree of hand sewing in order for you to fully complete a garment. It's not as much as fully hand sewing the entire thing, but you might need to close up a lining or do some detail work that you're going to need to do by hand. There's a number of different stitches that you can use for this. Today I'm going to talk about three-ish that are the ones that I use the most commonly and that I find to be the most helpful for your everyday projects. To give you a really in-depth look at the stitches, I'm going to discuss what they're good for, what they're commonly used for, and I'm going to show you the stitches at regular speed and again in slow motion so you can really see what your needle should be doing and how the stitches are completed. We're going to start with running stitch. Running stitch is what most people think of when they think about sewing. To complete the stitch, you're going to move the needle towards your non-dominant hand, picking up evenly sized bits of fabric as you go. Then you pull the needle and your thread through. It's a very simple stitch. It's very easy to do. It looks the same on the front and on the back, but it's also not very strong. It's great for holding things together. It's commonly used for basting, and it's excellent for doing very long seams that aren't going to take a lot of pressure and that would take a very long time to complete with backstitch. That would be things like connecting skirt panels together. The fabric from the skirt isn't going to have any tension, and so this is a great stitch to use to make sure that everything is connected really well, but also it doesn't take a super long time. The difference between using this for sewing and for basting is the size of the stitches. If you make them very small, they're harder to pick out. They also go a little bit slower. If you make them big, they're great for basting because you can pull them out real easy. Backstitch is another stitch that's very commonly used. It's quite a strong stitch, so you use it often. To accomplish this stitch, you take up one bite of fabric, moving your needle towards your non-dominant hand, and then you bring the needle back behind where your thread came out, take another bite, and continue moving forward. It's called backstitch because you are moving your needle back like that. The front will look very much like running stitch. You can connect them or leave some gaps, either is fine, but the back is going to look more like a continuous thread. You use this stitch for things that need strength. So if you're sewing in a sleeve, for instance, the seam around a sleeve can take a lot of pressure, so you need a little bit more of a secure stitch than what a running stitch would give you. You also use backstitch to attach waistbands, at least on the first pass, because a waistband is, again, an area that's going to potentially take a lot of pressure. It takes longer to do than just doing a simple running stitch because you are kind of backtracking as you go, but that's part of what makes the stitch strong. The stitch that it feels like I use the most is whip stitch. Whip stitch is a little bit more complicated than the others, not because it's hard, but because of the way you manage the fabric. If you're doing something like a hem, that would be an example like what you're seeing here, you would grab a little bit of fabric, as little as a single thread on the bottom piece, and then grab a bigger bite of the top piece before pulling your needle through. It makes a nice little zigzag type line as you work from top to bottom. And this is used a lot for hems, for attaching the interior of a waistband down, anything where you need something that's a little bit invisible. That's really the power of this stitch. The front of it, you have the little stitches, but look at the other side. You can barely see that, and I'm using black thread on white fabric. That is the wonder that is whip stitch. Whip stitch is also deceptively strong. It's great for attaching finished pieces to each other. You can use this for cartridge pleats, And it's even the stitch that you would use to attach the panels of your stays together. It doesn't look like it should be able to, but it can take an awful lot of pressure. You want to be a little careful with how you regulate this stitch. You can do very wide stitches, so that would mean taking your bite of fabric and then moving the needle farther down before you take your next bite. That's a great way to get something quickly hemmed in a hurry, but I found if you make your stitches too big, sometimes you can catch the heel of your shoe in your hem, which is not ideal. And so you really want to pay attention to the circumstance in which you're using these stitches. They are stronger when you group them really close together. So in stay making, you do, I want to say 12 or more stitches per inch to make sure that it holds everything really nice and secure. It's a simple stitch. It does go fairly quickly, and you will use it for just about everything. When I said 3-ish stitches, this is the ish stitch. This is running backstitch. It's a combination of running stitch and backstitch, and it's mostly used when you don't need backstitch, but you need something a little bit stronger than running stitch. You make a backstitch and then you turn it into running stitch. So every time you pull your needle through, you take a backstitch and then you work forward. And on the back, it looks very much like a backstitch with a bunch of running stitch in between. It's very, very quick. So if you need something that is more secure than just running stitch, this is a great option. You can also use it in all of the places that you would use running stitch. So your side seams, your skirt seams to hold panels together, all those sorts of situations are great for this stitch, especially if you've got kind of a fiddly fabric and you want to make sure that it's a little bit stronger. But it goes as quickly as running stitch, so it can be an excellent time saver. I wouldn't use it around sleeve heads because of the strength that's needed in those areas. So don't use this in place of backstitch. This is a good one to use in place of running stitch. You can make pretty much anything you care to make using only those 3-ish stitches. They really are the foundation for most hand sewing. There are a few other stitches that I'll cover later that are used for slightly different purposes, usually very specific ones, but these are the primary stitches that you're going to use, especially on beginner projects. You can use them to make pouches and bags and handkerchiefs and neckerchiefs and drawers and chemises and skirts and trousers and bodices. You can make anything you can make on a machine with those stitches by hand. It takes some time, it takes some practice. I've been hand sewing for about 5-ish years now, and my stitching has come a very long way in that time because I practice it a lot. I find it to be very soothing. Hopefully you will too, but give it a try just to get the basics down. You're probably going to need them for something at some point. I hope you found this video helpful. Please leave a note in the comments if there's anything you'd like to see, and I'll see you next time. Bye.